All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I am delighted to have our group here and our special guest tonight, which we're going to introduce momentarily. So thank you for listening in. This is being recorded, and as a result, will be available for your viewing if folks haven't been able to make it tonight or are finding that they need to uh, busy with something else. So anyways, let's start with introductions. So my name is Bob Crowley, and I'm the co-founder of History Expeditions, and which we established back in 2020. I live in Fair Oaks, California. Hal, want to go next?
Oh, sure. Thank you. I reside in Auburn, California. I'm a bit of a long distance equestrian and a part-time not an ultra trail runner, just a trail runner. And I'm the newest member of the History Expeditions, starting this last winter with the Grosh Brother expedition from Silver City, Nevada to Last Chance, California. For those who don't know where that is, I go to our website. There's a map.
Super. Tim?
Yeah, I'm Tim Tweetmeyer. I live in Auburn, California, not too far from Hal. Really a long distance runner, trail runner from the late 70s, early 80s, and a backcountry hiker. Done some Kings Canyon, Sequoia National Park, John Muir Trail type stuff. And Bob and I kind of got hooked into this history expedition thing by just reading some books and wanting to recreate stuff. So
by just reading some books and wanting to recreate stuff. So
I hear some feedback
Thanks,
from
Tim.
someone.
More feedback.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's some feedback from someone.
Yeah, I'm going to try to fix it.
If you're on Facebook, Bob, maybe you want to mute or something. I'm not sure. I don't know how that works, but I think I'm next. Am I next?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm Elka Reimer. I am also from Auburn. I also live not too far from Hal on the canyon here. I've been an ultra runner, gosh, I don't know, for 15 years or so. I don't do so much of that anymore. I do a lot more backpacking, these expeditions. Like Tim, I love the High Sierra on the eastern side. And yeah, I live here with my cattle dog, Lupin. And yeah, this is fun. Looking forward to this next adventure. I'm gonna popcorn to Jen.
Thanks, okay. And Jen.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jennifer Hemman. I also live in Fair Oaks with Bob. We are the Fair Oaks contingency of our group, and I'm very honored to be part of our history expedition team. And I am primarily an ultra runner, have been for over 19 years now. And I also am an adventure racer. So that's something that I do. And what I bring to the team is my expedition skills and outdoor skills. And yeah, I've been so honored to learn so much about California history because I'm a Boston native. And I'll pass the torch back to Bob to give to Frank.
All right. Thank you. So that's our team, and I'd like to now introduce our special guest. So Frank Tortorich. Now Frank is, I'm going to let him speak to his background because it's extensive, but we would regard Frank, I think, and most would agree, as the preeminent expert on Snowshoe Thompson. I'm not sure there's anyone on the face of the earth that can take that title away from Frank, and we've confirmed that with most historians in a large, broad region. Frank's also a wonderful author and historian, and I'll let you, Frank, talk more about your background in detail, but we are thrilled to have him here tonight, and we're going to be talking all things John Thompson in the next 45 minutes. Frank?
Oh, well, thank you. I cringe at the word expert. I'm a student. I'm still learning. And so much more that I could know about Thompson. He was a tough character to research because there's very few primary sources on him. He left very little material himself, and the few materials that were written on him were not didn't dive into his activities in depth. I'm basically a retired educator, but I did do a lot of hiking and backpacking in my younger years, and my primary passion was wagon train history, the westward migration, Carson Pass, which I call the Gold Rush Trail. More people came over Carson Pass than any other trail during the height of the gold rush. And I got into this type of research about 1978 when my wife Marianne and I got married, and our neighbor was a Forest Service ranger, new to the area. And I asked him what he knew about the Immigrant Trail, and he said he didn't know anything about the Immigrant Trail. What did I know? And I said, well, I knew a little bit about it. I ran across it hiking and a little bit of reading. And he says, well, why don't you sign up as a volunteer with Forest Service and do the research for us, because we need that information. And I said, sure. Well, being an educator, I had my summers off, and this would be a fun thing to do for 2 or 3 years, summers, and it ended up into a lifelong passion. So I started doing a lot of research on the westward migration and Carson Pass and that history. And then I started giving little slideshows and demonstrations of where the trail was. And short story, but long story short, back about 1994, 95, I was at Sorensen's Resort in Hope Valley. I am the owner, and I got to talking, and he asked me if I would do tours of the Immigrant Trail for his resort. Sure. And so I did all-day tours for them for 22 years, Marianne.
Yes.
And in the first 2 or 3 years, I ran across a lady who did the cross-country ski program for Sorensen's, named Nina McLeod. And she came on one of my tours. Well, down in the Woodford's Canyon is some overhanging boulders that the local legends call the Snowshoe Thompson Cave.
Mm.
And I knew very little about it other than what people had told me about it. But Nina grew up in Norway and was very passionate about Snowshoe Thompson. And I had written 2 books, one called The Gold Rush Trail, which is a small hiking driving guide on the Immigrant Trail, and another one called Hiking the Gold Rush Trail, which is over in the backcountry above Caples Lake. And she says, Frank, you need to write a book on Snowshoe Thompson. Okay, yeah, sure, Nina. Frank, you need to write a book on Snowshoe Thompson, and over a series of days and months. Frank, you need to write a book on Snowshoe Thompson. Okay, Nina. And I started the research at that time. It took me 10 years in the research and to finally get the book in print. And probably I would still be researching if it wasn't for a friend of mine in Amador County in Jackson, who was a local archivist. And he kept saying, Frank, when do you get that book published? I said, Larry, I'm not finished with the research.
Mm-hmm.
He said, look, you can research that book the rest of your life. At some point, you have to stop and get it published. And I got to thinking, and he was right. And so where I stopped in the book really was an in-depth study on Agnes.
Mm.
And so if you read the book, you'll notice there's a little bit about Agnes, but not a whole lot. And so then the chore was the really hard work came trying to get it published. And I've got one publisher said it's not scholarly enough, and another publisher said it was too intellectual.
Oh.
And so anyway, we finally got it published, and I never expected it to be a big seller, and I didn't write it to make money. I wrote it to fill a niche in history, and I think I accomplished that.
I think you did more than that, Frank. I think you took a man and a lot of fragmented facts and myths, and you very Columbo-like pieced that all together. And not only did you solve a lot of the puzzles and a lot of the myths, either confirming them or denying them, but you also wrote it eloquently. So thank you for everything that you've done.
Well, you're so kind. I appreciate that. I don't consider myself a writer. I think I'm a pretty good researcher. But if it wasn't for my editor and critic, my wife, Marianne, it wouldn't have been accomplished. Plus, I have
Amen.
edited as well.
Yeah. Amen. On God bless the editors.
They make me look good.
Frank, let's turn to our protagonist, John A. Snowshoe Thompson. Give us a little bit of kind of a brief of where John comes from, his background, how did he get to the United States, and ultimately how did he get to California?
Well, he was born in Norway in 1827, and to a very, very large family. His father was named Thorstein Gallo, and he had a number of children, and then his wife died, and he eventually remarried to his housekeeper, a lady called Gru Johnsdottir. And then they went on and had another bunch of children. And John's name was Jan Annen Thorstein's son of Thorstein. And then his father, Thorstein, passed away, and there was economic depression in Norway. And so Gru and took her one or two children and followed the Norwegian migration to the United States when John was 10 years old. One of the things I like to talk about a little bit, both in humor and fact, is when a baby is born in Norway, they don't get booties, they get skis. And because that was their mode of transportation. So John was an accomplished skier at 10 years old. And that would be the telemark style skiing, not the downhill type skiing. And so he was very, very knew the business quite well at 10 years old. And I'm convinced when he got to the United States that he also was skiing in Illinois during the winter time. Have facts to back that up, but it seems only logical during that period of time that he would travel that way along with the other Norwegians. For whatever reason, Gru and John moved around several times, living partly in Iowa, but seemed to end up in Fox River, Illinois, and then he grew up, and gold was discovered, and he and his half brother got the gold fever, and in 1851 headed for California with a herd of milk cows. And we're not sure what happened to John's mother. There is an indication that she might, they converted, not John did, but her mother and the daughter converted to the Mormon faith. And the daughter, we were pretty sure moved to Salt Lake City. And I have a hunch that if Gro had lived, she probably would have followed her daughter to Salt Lake City. But I've gone to the genealogy library. I've had people working on it. The trouble is, we don't know what her married name was. Only have her first name, and so we haven't been able to find any facts about that. But we know that John did come to California in 1851, stopping through Salt Lake City. And again, there's no documentation or any way that we found whether he stopped there to see his sister and mother. We just have no idea. But it probably is where they probably sold the cattle off to make money, and then proceeded on to, and we lose track of his brother. But John, we do know that John came to California by way of the Carson River route, and tried doing his gold mining down in the Coloma area, Kelsey and that area, and was not successful. And he went to Placerville one day to the hardware store, and he met a man named Thomas Knott, who had come to California. And Thomas Knott was a millwright, and he had also come through Genoa and Woodford's area, and knew that there was a possibility for building both sawmills and grist mills in the Woodfords and Genoa area. And so he talked to Tom about working for him, or John rather. And so we know that John carried the mail for Thomas Knott in 1852-53 over the mountains during the wintertime on his skis. And then when the work was, when we were all through working for him, he ended up at Puda Creek near Woodland, California, somewhere in that area. And some people say he bought a ranch down there, but my wife and I did the property records research down there, and there is no indication at all that he was an owner of any property down there, but he definitely worked down there. And then in 1855, he saw an ad where the postal department was looking for somebody to carry the mail during the wintertime between Placerville and Genoa. And Tom's thinking, well, that's something I could do. And so I guess he made himself a pair of oak skis, went out and practiced with them a little bit, and then applied for the job. And the postmaster all but laughed at him and said, I have to advertise this, but we don't expect anybody to really do that. There have been a few people that have tried carrying the mail in the wintertime on the old Canadian style snowshoes, and they just about died doing it. And the one that did get through took like 3 weeks or something. And Tom evidently convinced him that he could do it. And so that was in, I think, December of 1855. So in the first week of January of 1856, Tom, with his skis and a mail bag, left for Genoa and was back in 5 days. and nobody could believe that he actually did it, except he had the postmark from the mail to prove it. And that may be where his name came from when he left Placerville. Somebody said, "Good luck, Snowshoe," because that's what they called skis in those days, was snowshoes. Snow skates also. But the Norwegian translation would be skis. And Nina McLeod was the one that really assisted me in translating the Norwegian material that we could find. And she helped me with the book right along. That's why the book is dedicated to her. And she has since passed away. And so, and that just started this process of, during the wintertime, Thompson delivering the mail twice a month between Placerville and Genoa, and made quite a name for himself.
Well, quite an interesting beginning of his life. And one of the things that intrigued us was what we thought at the time seemed like a pretty amazing physical challenge and feat.
Oh,
And then as we researched it, we became in awe, and that drew us to decide to do a expedition about John Thompson, which we'll leave in March in Placerville, March 6th, and we'll take 5 days, which he did in 3, to march our way, trek our way, slog our way, and even ski our way to Genoa on the 10th, Sunday the 10th. So we're going to go from the 6th to the 10th, and we're going to follow a path that we've been researching for quite some time now, trying to piece together and connect the dots of where did he actually go on January 3rd, 1856, which was his inaugural Placerville to Genoa and back mail carrying trip for the U.S. Postal Service. I'd like to talk amongst all of us about the endurance, the strength, the mindset, the skills to survive in the wild. Really like to talk about all of those things as it relates to our team. All of us are ultra distance athletes, and we, for a hobby, like to put ourselves in those situations, many of those situations, voluntarily. But we gain an appreciation for what it's like to be at the very edge of one's physical and mental capacities. Clearly, Thompson showed up with an enormous capacity, and the ability to go nearly 100 miles in what would be sloppy conditions, sometimes 20 to 30 feet deep snow, sometimes near mud and Sierra cement and heavy snow and streams. And of course, he's going over about 20,000 feet of climbing in over 2 passes. And he does that in 3 days with a jacket, a hat, an 80-pound backpack full of mail and periodicals. And he takes a handful of food.
And no blanket.
And no blanket, and
No.
says, I'll navigate by the stars or what I hear or the terrain I see. And I'll move when the snow is most firm. So I'll move through the night, and I'll sleep when it softens in the day. And I'll eat what I have, and I'll rest against a rock, and then I'll get up and I'll keep going. That's an endurance athlete. That's maybe one of the greatest earliest American endurance athletes that's been documented. What does everybody think about this man, John Thompson?
Yeah, it almost seems mythical that someone could do that with such little food and provisions at all, carrying that type of weight over those conditions.
And his confidence is what really strikes me. He said he couldn't get lost. He basically said, it's too easy. I can't get lost. I know all the landmarks, and I just think his confidence was 150% stronger than any other human. And I hear now that he also in his lifetime saved a lot of people.
Mhm.
I think he was just a guy that was always looking for the right thing to do. And it's very inspirational.
Yeah, the one thing that I was fascinated by trying to think through today was that like a little bit of what you mentioned, Elka, is that, and Frank noted, is that he didn't carry much with him other than the mail, which is kind of puzzling, right? You think, oh, I'm going to make this trip through the mountains at, in really terrible weather. Anything could happen. You could get sick or fall and hurt yourself. You get stuck in a storm. And the only rational way I think of that is anything that he put in his backpack, like a sleeping bag or food, would leave less room for the mail, right? I think he thought my job is to move the mail, and the best way to do that is to carry as little as possible other than the mail.
Like
I couldn't think of
yeah.
any other way, because when you think of it as an expedition person or somebody that's going to do something extremely difficult, you want to go prepared for like the worst, right? Yet hope for the best. And it seemed like he just ran the risk all the time and, pretty much nailed it every time.
That was his confidence. He thought like he was the kind of guy that could put a person on his front and a person on his back and get them to safety. Like he just was like Elga said, he was mythical because he didn't need much to survive.
And I have to remind myself also that he wasn't wearing a backpack with a belly band. And I mean, these were just two straps on a bag that he was wearing, and it was just, it had to be almost painful. Well, for me, it would be painful. But, it was very crude backpack that he was carrying. In the beginning, on one or two trips, I think he carried a pistol with him. And then later, he thought, I'm not going to carry that weight. I don't need it. And then the only time he thought maybe he needed it was the encounter with the wolves.
Yeah.
If you recall in the book that when he was going across, I think it was in Hope Valley, and across a pack of wolves that were eating on a carcass. And he had his path was very close to them. And so he didn't make any eye contact with them. He put his head down and kept his constant pace. And according to his story, the wolves looked up and they came over and they lined up they sat down and all lined up together to see who this guy was and what was going to happen. And he just kept moving, and they watched him and they howled a little bit. And that was his thought might have been, I wish I had my pistol now. That was the only time that I think he ever might have had fear. The other thing he did in terms of Dan DeQuille, which is a pen name for William Wright, who was a journalist for the Territorial Enterprise, asked him about his navigation. And he just pointed, I have it right up here in my head. I've been clunking around these mountains all my life. I did skiing. I was a downhill skier a little bit. And the mountains, where you're going. And they're very, very distinctive. And so he knew that path very, very well when he was carrying the mail for Tom Knott in 52, 53. He came over there on foot in the summertime. He knew what those mountains look like. And so it isn't amazing to me that he even had a fear of losing his way or not which way to go. I could do that today if I had if I was a lot younger, had the strength and endurance, I could do that without a problem. I know those mountains really well, and so did he.
Yes, we should
follow the drainage,
point out he was
basically, right? The drainages and valleys.
Pardon me?
It said following the drainages and valleys.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're coming up 50, you're going to be up on Peavine Ridge, and you're in that canyon. So the Echo Summit, Johnson Pass, that's a natural. And then dropping down and going over Luther, that's a natural. It almost guides itself.
That's right. Yeah, Thompson, I think, was 29 when he did the 1856 carry, and so he's a strapping man, probably at the prime of his physical prowess. And we should talk briefly about the route. So Placerville is where he started at the old post office, and he did indeed, from our research, and I think this confirms the research that preceded us, he essentially followed what today is the 50 corridor, the Highway 50 corridor, because there were a number of factors. One was he had no map. He was using the stars, but he also was using the terrain. And as Frank said, the terrain's very natural. There's a reason 50 is where it is. It's where all the roads that preceded it were, and before them, the Native Americans used. So, and it is low-lying land in valleys following a river, following the American River, and then the west branch of the Carson River. So just common sense, if you're going to go from one place to the other, that's about 100 miles, you're going to try, and you're going to be carrying in the middle of winter all this weight, you're going to look for the path of least resistance. What's the easiest way to get from point A to point B? Because he was going for speed. And so the majority of the road systems and the power systems follow what's easy. And so our route will be on trails that parallel 50, but we'll head out, just as Frank said, out to Strawberry and up to Twin Peaks and up and over Echo Summit, down the Hawley grade. And then you take a right-hand turn at Myers and you begin to follow the next river, which is the west branch of the Carson. And of course, as Frank said, it flows right nicely through in the shadow of some of the largest mountains in the Sierra, and then up and over Luther Pass. And then again, it takes a hard left-hand turn and starts to follow up the eastern side of the Northern Sierra there that are on the eastern side of Lake Tahoe that separate California from Nevada. So,
and I don't think there was one route. I think there were, as you know, in snow conditions, you're going to find the best way to go. And he's going to stay on the ridges as much as he can, which the Indian trails did. They didn't follow the river. They went up on the ridges because you can't navigate in the bottom of a canyon. And so the ancient Indian trails were all on ridges. And that's where the wagon trains went as well. They were following the Indian trails. And so they knew the easiest way to go in the summertime. And so it was kind of a natural thing for him to follow along similar routes. Later on, he went over Daggett and down Kingsbury, what is now Kingsbury grade, because he was doing a lot of mail delivering as South Lake Tahoe developed. They called it Lake Valley at that time. So, he went multiple routes. He even went over Carson Pass. There's good indication he went over Carson Pass delivering the mail as well. And then later on down to Murphy's.
Yeah, I wonder, Frank, if he took something akin to like Mormon Immigrant Trail.
Yes, I believe he probably did. Yeah. That's a very gentle, easy way to go if you're familiar with that. Of course, that's where the Indian route went, and that's where the Carson River Immigrant Trail went.
Frank, it's interesting to me because we've been scouting the route. Many of us know the route because we've driven it, not knowing that we were ever going to do this expedition until recently. But if he left Placerville in that early January of 1856, he didn't encounter snow for maybe 20, 25 miles. Was he? So he was packing those heavy skis of his that weighed as much as maybe 20, 25 pounds.
Yeah, right.
Wow. And carrying the mail too. That's I'm
Yeah,
sure we don't have to do that.
100 pounds or something.
Well, one of the things that I think I would like to highlight is that weather conditions were much different back then than they are now. And there was a period that the geologists called the Little Ice Age, and it ran up through the middle 1800s. And so I think the snow conditions were a lot lower
Yeah,
than they are today.
Okay.
it certainly was the case for the Donner Party.
Because when he was applying for the job, he went out and practiced with his skis,
Mhm.
and then went and applied for the job. So that tells me he was fairly close to Placerville when he was doing that.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, yeah, okay. Because just thinking about it, today's environment, we won't hit snow maybe until what, maybe 5,000 feet elevation, and
Yeah.
it might be even sparse at that point.
I think it was different then.
Yeah. Okay.
We were just there and we didn't hit snow until what, Bob, until Strawberry
Yep, over 5,000 feet.
to the
Um,
Register
Well,
Rock.
Yeah, Register Rock. Let's shift gears to someone important in John Thompson's life, Agnes. How he became acquainted with Agnes, who became his future wife, and then widow. Let's see, Elke, I know you had done some research. We have put together a paper actually and published it a week or so ago about Agnes and had some research commissioned. And maybe you can talk a little bit about Agnes Singleton.
Yeah, and this is largely in part thanks to Erica Mailman, who wrote the article. But if it was difficult to find information on John, it was even way more difficult to find it on Agnes. There's just not much out there about her. She was born in Preston, England in 1831. She was 3 years younger than John. She moved to the US. She immigrated in 1866, and I believe she was 35 when she moved here. She and her stepmom were actually cooks for Snowshoe Thompson for a couple of years before the two of them got married. And once they were married, she moved into his cabin, which is kind of what we would call Woodford's. You guys have been to the site. Yeah. And a year later, their son, Arthur, was born. And, she became quite the skier herself, thanks to Snowshoe. And as did Arthur. They lived on a 160-acre farm, which she took care of in his absence because he was gone for long periods, which she knew that would be the case before she married him because they were his cook, her and her stepmom. They grew oat, wheat, hay, they grew potatoes. They had quite a few cattle and about 20 horses on the property. She was refined and even-tempered. It's believed that she was Mormon. So they both had religious backgrounds and outlooks. One thing that's really interesting that we all found is it appears that she was illiterate for much of her life. It sounds like at least the first half of her life, she was illiterate. And when John passed away, the probate documents she signed with the letter X. And also, I think, Bob, you found the census documents that also stated that she was illiterate. But
Correct.
she did learn to read and write after John's passing. She remarried. Let's see, how many years later was that? About 8 years later, John Scosa. Before that, also, unfortunately, their son Arthur passed away at age 11. He had diphtheria, I believe. But yeah, later on in life, she did learn to read and write during her marriage to John. John also passed early at the age of 53. Agnes lived to be 83. She died in 1915. During the time that she married John, they adopted John's nephew, who was 15 at the time. His name was Ernest. He also passed away pretty young. So of all of them, very strong Agnes lived the longest, for sure.
It probably the reason that she came to the area was because there was a Mormon influence in Genoa. And that might have been the draw, but I think also her brother was already here encouraging her to come, if I recall right.
Yes, I believe so.
The other interesting thing is that she was a housekeeper and a cook for John before they were married, as was John's mother, a housekeeper and cook and childcare for John's father before they were married.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that parallel.
So when John Thompson goes back to Washington, D.C. to basically petition Congress for the money that was owed him, all the years that he was carrying the mail, he writes home to Agnes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of curious. I wonder at what point she learned to at least read a little bit, or did she have someone read the letters to her? But he would write her letters.
Yeah, I've often asked myself that same question. So, and I don't have an answer for it.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure too when her stepmom, how long her stepmom was around. Maybe her stepmom was able also to help with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I'm curious how he was able to afford to go back to Washington, D.C., which is no small trip. Where did he get the financing for that? From his farm?
I think so. Yeah, I think he was making a very good living. Also, he was never, we say he was never paid by the federal government. But I do think he got money for contracting. I call him the first UPS or FedEx, because there were people that were asking him, would you take this on the other side of the mountain for me? And I think they were paying him. I'm sure they were paying him for that. So he was hired by the territorial press, a territorial enterprise, to carry the printing press over the mountains from California to Genoa in pieces. And he got paid for that. So not only was his enterprise of his own farming and ranching making a living for him, I think he made money there, but not paid by the federal government.
I understand he went into partnership with someone in not staging, but coaches. Of course, he was traveling over the Sierras in the summertime as well. And so he this at a time when the route was really pretty crude and rugged, because the wagon roads hadn't been improved by that time. I mean, later in his years, they did get established and improved upon.
Yeah, one of the reasons he wasn't paid by the federal government, because John was a subcontractor. In those days, the post office did not deliver the mail. The post office contracted with people to deliver the mail. Chord Penning was the one that held the mail contract between Placerville and Salt Lake City, going through Genoa. And but Chord Penning always was the underbidder. for those mail contracts, and he was always in financial straits. And which means to me that he wasn't really paying Thompson, his subcontractor, as well. Chore penning contracts were annulled 3 different times between 1851 and 1858-59. During those periods of time of annulment, Thompson continued delivering the mail. And there is said, well, he was getting $1 a letter for that. But then how do you collect that? Because the mail goes to the post office, and then the post office then delivers that, or the people come in to pick up their mail. And so are they collecting that dollar? Thompson wasn't. And then, of course, there was, I think, some shenanigans on that last mail contract where it was awarded to, I think it was William Russell of the Pony Express fame. And they were trying to pick up the mail contract from Missouri all the way to California. And they wanted chore penning section of that contract. And they had already proven that they were a viable operation. And I think the Postmaster General on that third annulment just said, okay, Russell, you've got the contract. But we have no record, couldn't find any record if they ever paid Thompson, for his efforts, even though he continued doing it. Even during the Pony Express period of 1860-61, then he was doing more time delivering the mail to Murphy's down the Big Tree Road. But I do think he was doing little side jobs of his own for people. Said, Mrs. Bowers wanted him to get a peepstone, a looking glass. And I don't think he was ever successful, but I think she was paying him for that. And of course, when they took that mud, that gray mud sample to be assayed, he was being paid for that.
So he might have been more of a businessman than we thought.
Oh yeah, I think he was. Yeah.
They boarded horses at the ranch as well.
Sure. So I don't think money was ever an issue, and the fact that the federal government, and you have to read my book. I can't go into the details because it's a very convoluted a story that took me just years to sort out that whole thing. And I had to go to National Archives, and I paid $150 or something to get documents about chore penning's contracts and annulments and all of those kinds of things. I found stuff in bizarre places that here and there I got a little clue of what happened. And that whole thing in Washington, that was a whole fiasco. But the bottom line is, what Congress said was, look, we already paid for that service, to the contractors. And you being a subcontractor, we can't pay double for what we've already paid. So he got caught up in the political machine there, and but there was some indication that he made some money, maybe up to $600. Yeah, I don't recall exactly all the details. I can't remember that. It's too convoluted.
Well, hey Frank, I got a couple for you. Can I ask a quick one here, Bob?
You go ahead.
We visited Diamond Valley where his ranch was, and outside there were 3 different monuments to him, and yet his name is quite often misspelled. Was that due to his wife?
I think it was due, because when she had the headstone made, contracted it, and this goes back again to her illiteracy. the P was dropped out of his name.
Mhm.
And so I think that perpetuated after that when people were doing these monuments. Well, there's his grave. That's how they spelled his name.
Yeah.
And of
I got
course-
one more quick one. The legend was when he got cold at night and he needed to stay warm, he'd do Norwegian folk dancing on top of rocks to generate heat. We've assigned that task to Hal so that each night we can get a native Norwegian dance going. So if
There
you
you
could pass
go.
along any dance tips to Hal,
Yeah.
we'll make
And-
sure he has
or
a couple of
Norwegian.
Shackletons before he gets started, but
Yeah.
we'll make sure we get that on record and out to the webpage.
Oh, man.
And like Snowshoe, I've been practicing before we start, so we'll be ready. I'll be
He's
ready.
in training. He's in training.
Yeah. I'm in training.
Now, I
So-
want to know, are you guys going to do oak skis? Are you going to make 10-foot oak skis that you're going to do your expedition on?
Well,
Absolutely
unless someone
not.
else is buying them, I'm not sure about that. But
Yeah.
We've been scouting skis. We even found a couple of Snowshoe Thompson skis in a couple different locations. We think those are on the bottom of the list, and at the top of the list is the modern day equipment.
yeah, we found some very lightweight with scales to help us go up hills and very lightweight skis, which were
Well, you have obstacles to deal with that Thompson never had to deal with.
what?
Highways and buildings and
Private property.
private property, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob and I did find that out this weekend. There's a lot of highway where Snowshoe Thompson went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're into kind of our home stretch here. And so what I'd like to do is ask one last question to have everybody weigh in on, and then we'll talk at the very end, just a quick update on the expedition, and then let everybody get on to sleep back east and hopefully supper out west. The last question is why? Why would this man do what he did? Put himself at risk, because every time he did cross the Sierra, whether it's the weather or the change in weather, or potentially of getting injured, or attacks from bears or wolves, maybe even getting shot at by a stranger. Incredibly dangerous what he did, and he did it onwards of 10 to 20 years. Why? Let's start with not Frank. I want to save Frank here for a minute. Let's start with you, Jen. Why did he do this?
Well, I have no doubt that he loved doing the right thing and he loved adventure. So it's a very simple equation to me. I'm not surprised by what he did now, knowing that he was such a businessman. He made money in other ways that were logical and were daily. I think this to him was a really fun adventure, and he was not scared. He felt very capable. So I don't wonder about it too much now, because I think his wife was on board. I think his son was on board. And I think he was someone who could not only save himself, but others. And he was not frightened. It was a mindset that he had. And to him, this was what he lived for. So I find that very comforting. He wasn't.
So you're saying he was the original, he was doing job gigging before job gigging was cool, right?
Yeah, like I think he had enough money and like he loved this. And I imagine that it was fun to come into Placerville and have everybody just love you because you did this amazing thing. I think he had a lot of friends and people who admired him. And I think he just loved doing the right thing. I mean, given how many people he saved and the way he was with his wife and his child, I think he was a guy who just did the right thing.
Yeah. How about you, Hal? What do you think? Why?
Well, why? He's Norwegian. It's in his blood. It was the skiing thing is just secondary. I mean, it was just natural for him. I've been reading, going through. Well, one, trying to find what letters he might have carried with him, but it led me to the Sacramento Union. And while he didn't write much down, like Frank said, and there's no maps per se, he would agree to be interviewed by the Sacramento Union. And you could tell from just what the responses to questions that the correspondent might have asked him, how he was incredibly at ease with what he was doing and doing what, somewhat might call a public service.
Mm. Mhm.
And,
Okay.
later in life, and Frank could confirm this, I believe he ran for public office, a board of supervisor in Alpine County.
Yep. That's
Okay. So he was just that, he had that mindset. And like I said, I think the skiing just was a natural for him. The mountains were nothing compared. And I've been to Norway. It's like, oh my goodness, he grew up there. So no, he's well suited for the task.
So Elka, John Thompson, is he just a guy that's trying to do the right thing? What's your take?
I think that's a big part of it. Like both, Jen and Hal said, I think it came kind of easy for him. I think it was natural and confident at it. It was fun for him. It would be like, volunteering to do something that you always thought was fun. Even if it was difficult for other people, he knew he was the person for the job, and maybe no one else could really do what he did. He was an anomaly, if I can just speak correctly. And again, like Jen said too, probably pretty popular guy for being able to do something that other people weren't either willing or able to do, and help others at the core of it all.
Tim, do you think there was an athletic streak in him, a competitive streak that said, I'm 29, I'm an incredible athlete, I have this natural skill of being very comfortable on the snow, I'm going to show people, and I'm going to challenge myself against the mountain and time?
Oh, absolutely. Being a Norwegian, he was trying to kind of display that Norwegian pride that he brought with him. The immigrants in those time where it's like, I'm conforming to the American way of life. But, what was the other choices in Norway? He'd be a North Sea fisherman. That's not exactly an easy job either, right? So he was used to hard. And I think when you look at his skills as a skier from the time he was born, I mean, that's just innate, and they just learned that there. And when he came over here, it's like, hey, not only am I good at it, but as a way to continue to show that Norwegian pride that he had in his skills of skiing and making a living at it.
Yeah. So Frank, you've heard from the peanut gallery. Tell us why.
I think you guys are right on target. He was very civic minded. And he could do something nobody else could do. He knew there were people over in Genoa that needed their mail. They needed that contact with the outside world, and he could provide that service, and he did it very, very well. So I think you're right on target with you. And then I'll throw the question back at you. Why are you doing it?
It's a long answer, which we don't have time for, but the short answer is we collectively love to challenge ourselves mentally and physically, which is why we do the ultra distances. We like putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations and seeing if we can solve all the problems that come up and all the obstacles and overcome them. I think it's innate in all humans. It's part of the survival skill. We also love history, and we love American West history, and we love the characters and the stories and the inspirations that come out of that. And so the chance to put those two things together every once in a while is what really draws us to this kind of unique way to share history. Speaking of sharing, I would love to have everyone that's listened in tonight, if you've enjoyed this conversation at all, and we hope you have, go out and buy this wonderful book that Frank wrote. It's available on Amazon and all the other infamous outlets that you can buy books on. It is a great read. It's a page turner. It is eloquently written, even though the author himself won't admit it. And if you are interested in America West history, or John Thompson himself, this remarkable man, this is the book to go get. Frank, we are so honored and so happy to have you join us tonight, and can't express enough gratitude for being with us tonight, but also all that you've done to bring this remarkable human being to the fore. Thank you.
Well, I'm honored to be asked, and I'm honored to be, and I'm humbled by the fact that I could actually do the research and provide that. Again, I didn't do it thinking I was going to get rich selling a book, because I'm not. It has sold and it's paid for my expenses, but that's about it. I did it to fill a niche in history, and I think I did that.
And you've done it
we're
well.
on and I'm just so excited about what you're all doing, and I'm looking forward to your success and your adventure. And thank you.
Well, thank you. And that's a great segue for just quickly for everyone. We are progressing on our training and trying to get in smack shape so we can do 100 miles up and over the Sierra and 2 passes, and following in the footsteps of John Thompson. We'll go out March 6th from Placerville, and God willing, arrive 5 days later in Genoa. And we will push out on our History Expeditions Facebook group, as well as some email, and on our website, more detailed information. There's quite a bit out there already. So if you haven't, please join our Facebook group and go to our website. And there's lots of information. But we will, as we get closer, talk about our live tracking, which we'll have again, and the route, and some of the more detailed stories about all of our protagonists. So that's it from us. For Jen and Elka, Tim, Hal, and Frank, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. And let's do this again. This was fun. We got a lot more to talk about.
And you're not going to make the trip from Genoa back to Placerville?
We're going to leave that to you. We're going to drive it.
I might turn around and just go the other way. Yeah, depends on how much food I have left over.
Thank you. I've had a blast.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for putting
Good night,
it
everybody.
together.
Thanks.
Good night.